Good morning, children. As we saw in the previous pages of the chapter, George's Key to the Universe, that George enters a house and befriends with Annie and her father Eric, who introduces Cosmos, the supercomputer. Cosmos tells George that it's the most powerful computer in the world and tells that he should take an oath to never misuse his scientific knowledge, even use it for the betterment of mankind. Okay, so now children, come to the next page. Okay, I'll just explain page wise. Okay, first of all, I'll read for you the page and then explain it. Okay, so let's begin. Let's continue with page number 3. Eric clapped. Annie burst an empty crisp packet. Cosmos flashed a rainbow of bright colors across his screen. Well done, George, said Eric. Cosmos will now show us how a star is born. Welcome, said Cosmos. Playing a little computerized fanfare to the universe, the room was getting darker and darker. Right? Come and sit here, George, called Annie, who had already settled herself on the big comfy sofa. Here, children, comfy means comfortable. George sat down next to her, and after a few seconds, he saw a tiny beam of very bright white light. It came directly from Cosmos' screen. The beam shot out into the middle of the room, where it wavered for a second before it began to sketch a shape in the air. But that looks like a... George began to speak. A window, said Eric proudly. Cosmos has made us a window on the universe. Watch closely. The beam of the light disappeared, leaving the window it had drawn in the middle of Eric's sitting room, hanging in mid-air. It now looked exactly like a real window. It had a big sheet of glass in the pane and a metal frame. Beyond it, there was a view. And that view was not of Eric's house or any house, road or town or anywhere else that George had ever seen before. Instead, through the window, George could see an incredible vast darkness peppered with what looked like tiny bright stars. He started to try and count them. Children, peppered with means covered or filled with a liberal amount of, right? George, said Cosmos in his mechanical voice, there are billions and billions of stars in the universe. New stars are created all the time. They are born in giant clouds of dust and gas. I'm going to show you how it happens. How long does it take for a star to be born? George asked. Tens of millions of years, replied Cosmos. I hope you are not in a hurry. Tut tut, said Eric, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the sofa. Don't worry, George, I have speeded it up quite a lot. You'll still get home for dinner. Now, explanation. Cosmos shows them how a star is born. Children, playing a little computerized fanfare means a loud or short piece of music played to introduce someone important. Here Cosmos introduces to the universe with a loud music. Room gets dark like a picture hall. Annie and George settled themselves and they saw a rectangular shape being sketched by a bright beam coming out of the screen, and that shape was like a window hanging in the mid of the room through which, no one could see house or road or nothing else, right? But only darkness filled with innumerable tiny stars, which George put a vain effort to count them. The window is made up of glass sheet with metal frame, and Cosmos told him that stars are formed in giant clouds of dust and gas, and it takes tens of millions of years for a star to be born. Okay, so here Eric, George was a little worried about the time he had been there, right? So Eric removed George's fear of getting late. So he assured him that he would get free sooner and be back to his home by the time of dinner. Page 4. Reading. George noticed something about the view through the window onto outer space. Not all of it was covered with little stars. In the bottom corner of the window, he saw a patch of total darkness, a place where not a single star shone. What's happening there? He pointed. Let's have a look, shall we? Said Eric. He pressed a button on a remote control and the view through the window seemed to zoom towards the dark patch. As they got closer, George realized that an enormous cloud was hovering in that spot. But hovering means hanging or floating. The window kept moving forward until they were right inside the cloud itself, and George could see it was made of gas and dust, just as Cosmos had said. What is it? He asked. And where is it? It's a huge cloud in outer space, much bigger than the ones in the sky, replied Eric, made up of tiny, tiny particles which are all floating around inside it. There are so many of these particles that the cloud is enormous. It's so big that you could put millions and millions of Earths inside it. From this cloud, many stars will be born. Now, explanation. While George was sitting and watching outer space through the window, he saw a dark patch at the bottom corner of the screen with no single star shining there. He didn't understand. What is it? Now, Eric pressed a button on a remote control and zoomed in to get the close view of the dark patch. George saw that the huge cloud was floating in that particular area. He got to see deep inside the cloud, which was actually made of gas and dust. Reading. Inside the cloud, George could see the particles moving around, some joining together to form huge lumps of matter. These great lumps spun round and round, gathering even more particles all the time. But as the particles joined together, the spinning lump weren't getting bigger. Instead, they seemed to be getting smaller, as though something was squeezing them. It looked like someone was making gigantic dough balls in outer space. One of these giant balls was quite close to the window now, and George could see it spinning round, getting smaller and smaller all the time. As it shrank, it became hotter and hotter, so hot that George could feel the heat from where he sat on the sofa. And then it started to glow with a dim but frightening light. Why is it glowing? Asked George. The more it shrinks, said Eric, the hotter it gets. The hotter it gets, the brighter it shines. Very soon it's going to get too hot. The ball exploded from the inside, throwing off its outer layers of burning hot gas in all directions. After the explosion, the ball was shining like the sun. Wow, said George. Is that the sun? It could be, Eric replied. That's how stars are born, and the sun is a star. When a huge amount of gas and dust combines and shrinks to become dense and hot, as you have just seen, the particles in the middle of the ball are so pressed together they start to fuse or join up, releasing an enormous amount of energy. This is called a nuclear fusion reaction. It's so powerful that when it starts, it throws off the outer layers of the ball and the rest is transformed into a star. That's what you just saw. The star was now shining steadily in the distance. It was a beautiful sight. Josh gazed at it, amazed by its power. Every now and then he could see huge jets of brightly shining gases sent hundreds of thousands of miles from the surface at extraordinary speeds. And the star will keep on shining like this forever? He asked. Nothing is forever, George, said Eric. Explanation. Eric told George that the cloud is much bigger than the ones we see in the sky. Many tiny particles of dust form a huge cloud, and it is so big that millions of Earths could be swallowed in it. Right? So, children, here you just keep framing the picture that George could see through the computerized window that Cosmos had created for him to show the birth of a star. Okay, so George could see the particles were joining together and forming huge lumps of matter. Okay, so these lumps squeeze like dough balls instead of getting bigger. So children, have you seen your mother kneading the dough to prepare chapatis for you? Okay, we put together the wheat, flour and water to make the dough balls, right? So similarly, these lumps of matter squeeze themselves like dough balls. Okay. Eric tells him that with the nuclear fusion reaction, the huge ball shrinks. The hotter it becomes, the brighter it shines. So, in the window, George saw that consequently the ball exploded from inside, throwing off the outer layers, and a tiny little star took birth. So, children, in short, when a huge amount of gas and dust combines and shrinks to become dense and hot, the particles in the center of the ball are so pressed together that they start to join up or fuse and release an enormous amount of energy, and this energy is called nuclear fusion reaction. And when it starts, it throws off the outer layers of the ball and the rest is transformed into a star. Okay? So this was the explanation of your chapter. Now, these are the words and meanings you need to note down. Assignment for the day. 2 questions are written over there on the slide. So, these are, what do you think Cosmos told George to take an oath? What else can you add to it? And second question is, what did George see through the window about the birth of a star? Children, you don't need to write them, okay? Only record your voice and send your answers to me, okay? Now watch a video from New York Times. It will help you understand the birth of a star.
Hanging from Orion's belt in the blade of the hunter's sword is a jeweled cloud known as the Orion Nebula. Space here is littered with small globs of gas and dust. These are protostars, baby stars in the making, stellar cocoons, cosmic tadpoles. They form in galactic nurseries like Orion from clouds of gas and dust mingled with the ashes of earlier stars that have died and exploded. But like all newborns, the young star faces a perilous future. Buried inside this dusty cocoon, where astronomers can't see with regular telescopes, a secret star is being born. As the baby star tries to burn its way out of the cloudy egg that sheltered and birthed it, radiation from powerful stars nearby eats away the cocoon from the outside. Too much outside radiation can burn away not just the cocoon, but the disk around the new star, leaving the star naked and alone. If the disk survives, it could make planets, first by electrical forces as particles randomly collide and stick, then by gravity as clumps attract each other. As a planet forms, it will scour its orbit of dust, leaving a telltale gap like the grooves in a record. Recently, astronomers using the new ALMA radio telescope have made the most detailed picture yet of what might be planets being born. They found dark grooves scoring a disk around a star known as HL Tauri, some 450 light years from here. The disk is about 22 billion miles across, about 4 times the size of the realm of the planets in our own solar system. Are these gaps sheltering planets? Are we seeing the curtain rising on a new set of worlds like our own? HL Tauri is only 1 million years old, a blink in the long lifetime of a star. For a newborn sun, every grain of dust is a promise. It's morning in the Milky Way. Everything is still possible.